Hello students, welcome back to another episode of Principles of Micro. So before going to chapter 9, I wanted to give you guys a brief overview of the different market structures. So on one end, there's perfect competition. That's what your book refers to as competitive markets. So not all markets are equally competitive. If you have perfect competition, though, you can't possibly get any more competitive than that. You have lots and lots and lots of different sellers out there. The opposite extreme is a monopoly. That means there's only one seller, so you can't possibly get any less competitive than that. There are also two cases in the middle. So it's what's called an oligopoly. That means there's only a handful of sellers. So it's similar to monopoly, but because there are a couple of sellers, there's still a little bit of competition. There's also monopolistic competition. That one is where there's lots of sellers, so it's more similar to perfect competition than it is to a monopoly. So other differences between these market structures, if there's perfect competition, all the firms here are selling things that are really similar to each other. In the other kinds of markets, the products are different. So one common example of monopolistic competition is restaurants. Each restaurant is a bit different. Things like the Texas Roadhouse and IHOP are not the same. They're both restaurants, but they're selling different kinds of food, and you have different preferences over them. Oligopolies also sell differentiated products. With a monopoly, there's only one seller, so there's only one product. Some other similarities and differences in perfect competition is what we call free entry and exit. By free entry, I mean any firm can enter this market without paying any additional costs. Free exit means that any established firm can leave the market, again, without paying any additional costs. This is a very important idea in perfect competition because it drives down the economic profits to zero in the long term. So if a firm is looking at a market and there are profits in that market, they're going to be tempted to join that market, and that's going to increase the competition, and more competition between firms will drive the profits to zero eventually. The same is true for monopolistic competition. If you see a market where profits are positive, you're going to want to jump in. That's going to increase the competition, drive profits down. Now, oligopolies and monopolies are less competitive, and they can sustain that because there is no free entry and there is no free exit. There are things that prevent new firms from entering the market. So maybe a monopoly is the only firm that controls maybe some kind of natural resource. If you have the only oil company in the entire country and you own all the oil fields, then nobody can compete with you because no one else has any oil. So that barrier is stopping other firms from competing with you. That means you can preserve your monopoly status. If you want to start a new airline, buying new planes is super expensive, and getting all that stuff together also super expensive, getting to airports, all that. So unless you already have a spectacular amount of money, your dreams of starting a new airline probably not going to happen. So the really big barriers to entering the airline industry. That's why we only have a handful of major airlines. So all this ends up having an effect on how much market power the firm has. So way back in chapter 3, we said market power was the firm's ability to influence price. If there's perfect competition, a ton of firms all selling the same thing, you're just too small to have any real impact on the price. If everyone else is selling the good for $7 and you try to sell the same thing for $8, why do people buy from you? They get the same thing cheaper from someone else, so you're powerless to raise the price. So you have no ability to influence price. We say you are a price taker. You have to take the market price as given. You cannot change it. Monopolistic competition gives you a little bit of market power. So we said restaurants were an example of monopolistic competition. Because each restaurant is a little bit different, customers might pay a bit extra if your restaurant is special. So you might have a little bit of power to jack up the price on them. So that gives you some market power. When there's an oligopoly, there are some firms, but not very many, competing with you, and your products are all different. So if there's less competition, that gives you greater influence in the market, greater ability to influence price. If you're a monopoly, you're the only game in town, that gives you the most power you could possibly imagine to influence the price. So that's how the different market structures work. We'll learn a lot more about that in more depth in the next several chapters.